This is the Comedy Kiosk, podcast by Monday and Munoz. Please welcome Monday and Munoz.
Welcome to the Comedy Kiosk, a podcast in which we discuss news, opinions, and ideas about comedy. I'm David Munoz.
And my name is Igor Monday.
And today's topic is called Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. This topic has come about because recently two comedians have passed away, one of each that Igor and I admire, one of them being Norm Macdonald, and the other one being...
Sean Lock.
Yeah, and unfortunately they've passed away. Well, it got me thinking about the comedians that have passed away but who are huge influences on us and why. So, for example, Norm Macdonald, he himself, his comedy, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of his stuff. He was good, but what I really admired about him was that he was different. He did a whole different sort of style, very kind of laconic delivery, but at the same time, he kind of mumbled and he went on different tangents when he discussed things. But on the other hand, he was actually very critical. He really gave his opinions, but you just didn't really notice it that much. But sometimes he could smack you in the face with it. But he did it in such a jovial, sort of like, yeah, whatever, yeah, we'll see, sort of attitude that you didn't notice. I remember seeing him on The View, and he had all the ladies on that show, like, he was telling a shaggy dog story, which is basically a comedy joke which goes nowhere. That's the whole point. And he was just leading them around. You could see them, like, trying to follow his train of thought and the story he was telling and wondering, like, okay, where is this going? Where is this going? And he just kept going and going until they all started finally clicking in, like, he's going nowhere. He's just literally leading. And he was there chuckling to himself. Look at like, I've got you all running around me right now. And he was just that way of like masterfully controlling them. And, he was able to give these, his opinions though. Like, for example, on SNL, he was in charge of this news segment where they do the news update. He wasn't the original one who did it. I think Chevy Chase was the original one. He's kind of took over a little bit after that. But the whole idea is that when he did it, like, for example, when OJ was acquitted of murder, he literally went on air and he opened up with, well, OJ's been acquitted of murder, and so that means that murder is now legal in California. And it was like a smack in the face because the producers told him not to do it and he still went ahead and did it. But because of the way he did it, it was like, fair enough, and he kept going. So even when he got into trouble, he just shrugged his shoulders and was like, whatever. So it was that fearlessness, it was that uniqueness, and I think that was... that was great. He showed a different way.
Yeah, I feel like that a lot of comics, because I follow a lot of comedians, comedians on the circuit and comedians I met while traveling and performing and stuff. Of course, I have them on Facebook and Instagram and so on. And I saw all of them writing about Norm Macdonald and about his death and kind of showing some kind of appreciation and, like grief for his passing and things like this. I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of the guy until he died, but I know that if there are some actual comedians listening to this podcast, maybe they will think, oh my God, what kind of comic are you that doesn't know other comics? But just there is this like whole generation, I think, of especially American comics that I've missed on, because when I kind of joined the comedy world, let's call it like that, when I started watching stand-up and then performing and so on, it was already kind of, I would say, comics that started doing it early 2000s. So none of those old like 70s, 80s, even 90s comics I've ever really followed or watched. And those are the ones that are dying nowadays. It's like the guys or that have already passed away previously. But not only Norm Macdonald, who passed away literally maybe a week ago before we recorded this episode, but also approximately a month ago or a few weeks ago, one of my personally favorite comics passed away as well, also from cancer, Sean Lock. And this is more the type of comics that I follow and enjoy. He was a British comic who was a lot on TV.
Panel shows and stuff, right?
Yeah, of course. He had like his stand-up specials as well. He had his live at the Apollo appearances and so on, but he was also a regular on a few kind of well-known and well-loved panel shows. And I think also the fact that why so many people loved him and why so many people... Well, first of all, he was that kind of, fighter till the end kind of guy. No one knew that he was suffering from cancer.
Norm did the exact same thing. Like, he didn't tell anyone, apparently. It came to a shock to almost everyone, even some family. Like, he was like, no, don't want anyone to know.
I think that's some kind of, I would say, responsibility that comes with the job. Because
you want to make people laugh. You don't want to bum them out. And it's like, unless I can crack a good joke about me having cancer, I don't know. What's the point of telling people?
Yeah,
I'm not going to make them laugh.
people see you as an entertainer, and then at the end of the day, if you drag that, because they didn't, cancer didn't appear a few days before they passed. They dragged that illness for months or years before that. But, making it public and letting people know would only make them kind of not see you. Like, if you do some kind of appearance on TV, performance or anything, they would just be like, oh, he's so brave performing. Yeah. They wouldn't see you as a comedian anymore, but more as like a victim or something,
Yes.
So I think that even some like Chadwick Boseman and someone like actors also like hit it till the last moment, because otherwise they would even in the last few years maybe lose some opportunities to act, to perform, to do what they love, because people would be like, oh, don't strain yourself, we want you to rest and things like this. So Sean Lock also kept it private until basically his passing. But I was so shocked and so surprised by the influence it had on kind of, mostly British, but like media and community and society and so on. I didn't understand that people really, 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 in a way, like respect and look up to comedians, because it's some kind of very rare, I would say, role in a society of a person that you kind of don't even look at, they might die one day, because they're just there to make you feel better.
And kind of and comedians, kind of their job is to distract you from life, from the reality.
Yeah, exactly. From your own maybe struggles, from your own challenges, illnesses,
your own grief,
whatever. Yeah, exactly. So you kind of don't even, at moments, you don't look at them as people. You look at them as comic relief, right? As a way of forgetting about those real things. But then that's why it hits you like a ton of bricks when that happens, and one of such people who were the inspiration or the distraction or the joy you needed actually pass away. So I can't relate that much to Norm passing, but I can say that Sean's situation and news actually caught me by surprise, and I was very shook by it. And I actually, I thought about it as well, and about, how important it is that these people manage to actually leave a mark, that they will be missed to that extent by so many people, and that there is that huge hole that they left in I wouldn't say in people's lives, but just in general, in entertainment, in comedy culture, and because they really were unique in what they did, right? And I feel like this is something that they're not the first ones. Obviously, they're the most recent ones that it happened with. But I remember when Robin Williams passed away, it was the same kind of thing. I think with him, maybe
that
even
hit me
more.
hard. That hit me really hard. And I'd never really been hit at all, really, by any celebrity dying. It was like, oh, that's a shame. Like, oh, that musician has died or that actor has died. I was always like, oh, yeah, well, that's life. They had a good time, and obviously they made the most of it. I mean, look at them. If anything, I was kind of envious. Like, man, to die, but with having all those like achievements behind you, like, man, that person had a great life. That's awesome. Robin Williams was the first one where I remember when I heard the news, I actually stopped and I kind of went blank, and I think I even went a little bit white. And later on, I reflected. I'm like, man, it's the first time I've ever actually reacted to a celebrity's death in that way. Like, I don't care. They're celebrities. Who cares? Like, whatever. And his was the first one. And I think, I found that very interesting. And even my sister was like, it was almost like you were losing a member of the family, almost like there.
Yeah, I think with him, for example, it hit me pretty hard as well. But I think because he was such a big part of my childhood and stuff.
Growing up, movies, stand-up.
And especially because he was that kind of, again, like an entertainer, not just a stand-up comic who you see only on stage, but he was in so many like family movies, Mrs. Doubtfire, Peter Pan, Jumanji, that kind of stuff that I watched as a kid, and I was... he was like an icon, like...
And also he was always like, when the moment, like even on talk shows, the moment they mentioned he was going to be one of the guests, you were going to have fun. Yeah. You were going to have fun. It was not going to be boring. It was almost like, bring the crazy on. Wait, stop. Let me pop some popcorn. I need to watch this and really, savor it.
I think it's always, when it's such a person that has brought so much to the table, that is so kind of charismatic, that is so unique, that is so talented, and so on, it's always much harder. Or when you have some personal, you know, let's say connection to this. As I said with Robin Williams, it was mostly because during my whole childhood I watched him in movies, and I was like thinking, oh my god, such an amazing actor, character actor, and so on. I remember out of like some other celebrity deaths, I remember when I heard, and you know, kind of, you remember where you were when you heard some news. I remember when I heard the news about Michael Jackson, but that's also just because, you know, when I was a child, there was this singer and kind of a celebrity, and let's say a lot of like scandals and stories in court and so on. Michael Jackson. It was like Michael Jackson, all the time Michael Jackson. Then one day there was no more Michael Jackson. You know, it's just kind of an end of an era. You know, I would say, like for a lot of people, older people, I would say older than me, maybe your generation, maybe even older, when David Bowie died, for example.
I was actually just thinking of Bowie.
So for me, it wasn't that much because, again, that was kind of more, I would say, 80s or something, people who actively...
Yeah, but also, I mean, for me, I mean, my little side connection was that actually I was in an advertisement when I was a kid. Part of the school, we were in an ad promoting his movie Labyrinth, where he played, Jared. So in a way, like, that's why, you know, David Bowie was like, I promoted his movie in Australia. Me and a bunch of other kids. But even then, like, even with Bowie, like, you know, I was like, oh man, that sucks, because, like, you know, he was such an entrepreneur and like someone who's breaking the mold. But I still didn't get as upset as when Robin Williams died. Like, I was like, oh man, that sucks. But I didn't get shocked. I didn't freeze. With Robin, I freezed. I literally was just jaw dropped wide open. It was like, what the hell?
I think the way also, and the secrecy of it as well, the fact that, you know, there was no illness, he wasn't old or anything. It just came kind of
out of nowhere, it seemed, So, and then later on, we learned that there was an illness, and that it was almost in response to that. And you were just like, oh. And then after a while, I was like, oh, I get why. Like, yeah, fair enough. Like,
I had that kind of shock with, but again, it's kind of a personal story with Chester from Linkin Park, which was a band that I enjoyed so much as a young teen, and you know, it was the same era when I was just growing up. And
so mine was Chris Cornell just before that sort of thing.
All right, I see. Yeah, that's same.
So Chris Cornell for me.
It's really hit me and affected me, since it's through so many important moments in my youth, I would say. I went back to that music and I listened to it and so on, and now that person that created all of that let's say helped me or influenced me so much is gone. So I think it's harder when you have some kind of, and I cannot imagine because obviously a lot of my, let's say, role models or something in comedy especially are much older than me at this point. So obviously at some point in my life we're going to lose them as well. I think that will be the moments where I will actually feel how influential they were,
and that's the thing. I think it's the influence as well is a big thing. Like we were just saying, like, you know, Norm Macdonald with his very unique delivery. Sean was kind of like, you know, he was always on those panel shows. He was very quick-witted, on the fly sort of stuff. You know, and then you think of all the other like big greats that people, you know, on the shoulders on which we kind of stand. Like before that, you know, we had Robin Williams, you know, his unique delivery style. He's kind of hyperactive, manic sort of, you know, freaking, I don't know, Yoda on methamphetamine sort of thing, running around sort of style. And his stand-up, he did have good stand-up. I can't remember what the special was. It was a little bit after 2008, something about missiles or something. I had it on CD, and I probably almost destroyed that CD listening to it over and over and over again. It was really funny. But he was, you know, characters, voices. He was a walking sketch show. I think that's how I would describe Ron Williams. Like, what's his style of comedy? Walking, one-man sketch show. He can do it all. Before that, you had like Richard Pryor from like the 70s sort of thing, like late 80s, from the 60s into the late 60s, early 80s. But, you know, Richard Pryor, he had that confessional style, which is now just ubiquitous. You know, comedians come out and tell you about their true self and make themselves vulnerable and make fun and then throw jokes and things. That's what Richard Pryor was sort of, you know, about. He would blatantly talk about his addictions and the stupid things he did. And I remember seeing a special recently of his, like, revisiting it and him shooting the car. And like discussing about him shooting a car after he had an argument with his wife or something and the police coming. And him just turning it into like a funny little thing like, yep, oh, that's the car. Yep, think the car's dead, or something like that. And, you know, that sort of style. And then before him, you had people like Lenny Bruce, you know, one of the originals of Well, the other one I forgot to kind of mention on the way there was Bill Hicks when he died in the 90s, and Lenny Bruce, like the people who, and then of course George Carlin. They're the ones who criticize society, criticize the rules, would basically be the one yelling into the night sort of style of comedians. And Lenny Bruce was like getting arrested. He was one of those comedians who decided to go against I can't remember, the Committee for Morals and Ethics or something like that in America. Like he would be regularly arrested, put in jail for the night, get out, then go up, get on stage, make another bunch of jokes, and then get thrown back in jail because he was breaking those rules. You know, he was against censorship and basically like, no, he was the one that kind of allowed then Richard Pryor and then allowed George Carlin and Bill Hicks and people like that to just get up and say whatever they wanted and really attack the authority figures. So yeah, it was because of them, like they've all passed, but they're all the ones that we base on, like, you know, that we've grown up standing on in a way. So,
yeah, I mean, I remember, for example, it's when you don't know the context, and you know, with comedians, as we talked about in one of our previous episodes, it's really hard to say what's real and what's made up and what's a character and what's the person, etc. So when you watch them on stage, you always see the person, but even more the comedian, the character, right?
Yeah.
The performer. So when you hear about something tragic from their personal life, or even when you learn of their death or something, it's always a different, let's say, weight to that, because you only saw them as that, you know, funny guy with a mic on stage.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
remember when Patrice ONeill died, that when I learned how he died, and then when I rewatched one of the Comedy Central roasts, so basically he was on the dais for that roast, and
so they were roasting him.
No, they were not roasting him.
So
they
was
were
it Charlie
roasting-
Sheen?
It might have been
The
Charlie
Sheen
Sheen,
one?
one of those, maybe Trump or something like this, like approximately 10, 12 years ago. I don't know when it was, and he was there as well, and everyone kept making jokes like, oh my God, you're so fat, you're gonna die of diabetes. Oh man, like it's gonna be funny.
Even he made a joke about that at one of the roasts. Like he made
a bunch of jokes.
He made roast like, motherfucker, I'm about to die. I'm gonna die of diabetes. What the hell is your excuse? And he started roasting the other one.
He made a bunch of jokes about that, even in his sets and interviews and stuff. But then, you know, when you in hindsight, when you know that that's how he actually ended up dying out of, you know, after a long and painful illness and struggle and so on, and you watch that, and you know, obviously nobody there meant anything bad with it. That's the format.
No
of it.
ill will.
You roast and you make fun and you kind of joke, but you know, you do feel a bit, I would say, sad, you know, like knowing that this performer, this comedian who really took it like a champ and like a hero, all these jokes, and you know, he jokes himself, that is the way that he sadly also passed. So of course, if anyone maybe took it seriously enough, or if these people would even share these kind of things, because I know that especially comics sometimes live in that little shell of comedy. And
well, it was like you're saying about the cancer before. They neither Norm nor Sean told anyone about it.
Yeah, so like they would rather joke about it and die the way they lived, you know, as comedians, than as some kind of victims and sob stories and so on. So that's why I think it's pretty hard usually for comics to even admit that something is wrong and to ask for help and things like this. But I wanted to ask a question. So seeing that we're discussing people who really made their mark, right? And as you said, they kind of paved the way for a lot of modern day comics, and not only comics that have made it, that are on TV or selling out arenas and stuff, but even for people like us who do small shows in local clubs. But surely there would be no comedy scene in Moscow, Russia, which started maybe 10 years ago here, if there were no, you know, Carlins and Pryors and Williamses of comedy in the States or in Britain or somewhere else, where it all started, where it was the cradle of this art, let's say, right? So obviously,
so we finally decided it's we're admitting that it's art and not just craft or art, right?
Well, whatever.
That's called a callback, ladies and gentlemen. It's when you refer back to a previous thing from a comedy set, except this time we're doing it with the previous episode.
So look up the episode where we discuss what is comedy really, how to define it. And David kept calling himself a craftsman. So if I remember right. So basically, based on everything that they've created, they've contributed, their work amounted to, right, and resulted in the possibility of us performing in English in Moscow, for example.
Right.
So stand-up has grown to such size and to that extent that it's now a well-known art form. People enjoy it, people pay to see it. Half of Netflix is stand-up, etc. So what do you think? Is it still possible to leave such a huge mark for the future generations of comics? Or it was just because that was the time where comedy just was starting and it was, like a big thing to be the first, let's say, comic that would speak openly about some things. You were the first comic that made big in Hollywood. You were the first. Yeah. You know what I mean? Do you think that our generation, comedians of our generation, will also have this potential of being so big, influential, and actually making a difference and leaving a huge gap once they're gone?
Yep, I think we can.
All right.
No, I will continue.
Very structured answer, David. Yeah. You understand how podcasts work. This is not like a yes or no type of conversation.
You want examples or something?
No, I want your opinion.
Yeah.
I want your opinion.
Yeah. No, I do think we can, because, I mean, each generation someone has done something that has broken the mold. I mean, like I said before, Lenny Bruce, he talked about censored topics, like something that the government was censoring. Now, because of him, comedians can pretty much say whatever they want. And then you had Richard Pryor
in some countries.
Yeah. Then in the 70s, you have Richard Pryor, for example, and then also George Carlin. Carlin continuing on with the let's criticize the big man. Richard Pryor doing the same thing, and also speaking very personal perspectives, talking about what it was like to be a black man in America, like not hiding it, not trying to, smile and keep it under wraps, but making fun of it, but also making people aware of the struggles and his personal struggles. So, that's why they're known, because they were pushing boundaries. They did new things. Steve Martin now, so he's alive. To go with the general theme, it doesn't matter if they're dead or alive.
Let's see when we publish this episode.
Yeah. I watched his masterclass on Masterclass, and the one advice, like the big advice that he gives, the first thing he does, he's like, look at what everyone else is doing and then do the opposite. Do something different. And that's how he made a name for it. Like, even if you don't like his style of comedy, and I generally don't, his general comedy is fine, but he was stand-up stuff that made him, break out. No, not my cup of tea, really. It was just weird and hacky a little bit and stuff like that. But now, when I watched it again, and when he was discussing it, I could see what he was doing. And yeah, he was just doing something new. He was pretty much doing what Lenny Bruce was doing, but in the opposite direction. Because at the time, there was things like the Vietnam War, civil rights, all that sort of thing. He was doing the opposite, where then he was taking away the focus from the politics and letting people escape. He was about true escapism and making himself to be a jerk, kind of an arrogant jerk who had no right to be arrogant, which was sort of like a representation of all these kind of I-know-it-all people sort of thing. So he did something new, and that's the thing. And there's always someone doing that. There's always someone, and all the way through, your Owen Williams, your Bill Hicks, and you had your Eddie Murphys, your Chris Rocks. Now with Norm Macdonald and things like that, him doing his kind of style. Emo Phillips, who's still around these days, still doing jokes and stuff. But he's weird, abstract. You got your Patton Oswalts, all these guys, the alternative comedy scene, which then eventually becomes mainstream or just comedy. You know what I mean? So I think we'll always do. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe someone will do something. Maybe you'll do something. Maybe I'll do something. And we'll find a certain persona or a certain way of doing comedy that people will look at and then they'll copy.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, even these examples that you've mentioned, they were mostly kind of 70s, 80s, 90s.
But I mean, everything moves on. Like Norm Macdonald would be 2000s.
That sort of style. Fair.
So I'm just saying, each generation, each new era, we get something new.
Yeah, I'm just saying, now I think it's much harder to be the first one doing something, the one to break the mold, because all the molds have been broken, rebuilt,
I disagree.
and broken again.
I disagree about they've already been broken. I disagree with that. I just think that the point is that you can't break a mold until you discover the mold. And there are still molds that maybe are still to be discovered that we just haven't found yet. The other reason why we can't imagine it is because we haven't discovered them yet.
Maybe we still have our potential to leave our mark, but also, is it something that, because what I aspire to as a comedian, we talked about this already many times about why we do comedy, right? And I always keep saying and keep coming back to the fact that I do comedy so I can just make people laugh. I feel that that's kind of my, let's say, mission, right? It's just to make people feel good, to make people laugh, to make people forget about their real life and struggles and problems and issues and whatever, and they just have a good hour, 2 hours, whatever, of entertainment. I'm an entertainer. I'm just, like a jester. Yeah, I'm just there to fill people's lives with some joy.
Yep.
Whatever. That's how I see myself. I'm not there to, if I can, of course, say something smart, if I can say something wise, if I can, influence people to do something right or good or whatever. Yeah, of course, I would like that. But at the end of it all, I would just say that I'm there to make people laugh. Yep. But if I make enough people laugh, and if I really help people and so on, and one day when I'm gone, if people would be like, oh yeah, I miss that guy, he used to make me laugh.
Yeah.
I think that's, in professional terms, that's what I aspire to be, to end up being, right? That there will be some kind of, because I think we have very limited time on this earth and in this life, and I think the main people kind of strive to, let's say, accumulate a lot of wealth or something like this, live a comfortable life or something like this. Of course, I would love all of that, but what I would really like, people still kind of talk about, I don't know, Tesla.
Yeah,
he's still, I think, once a day somewhere in the world someone talks about him. So you're never really dead if you're still, relevant.
Right. Have you been watching that cartoon movie with the afterlife, the one that's based on Mexican sort of folklore sort of thing with the Day of the Dead?
Not in the last 4
Coco?
years.
That's it, Coco. Have you watched Coco recently?
I've watched Coco when it came out, but that's not the.
It just sounds like you were telling us the plot about that. Like you want to make sure that you survive into the afterlife of Coco, the Coco afterlife. Like as long as someone remembers my name, I will be able to continue into the afterlife and have a good time.
Yeah, but isn't that, because that's what I would really like to have, that, I record my special, for example, 1, 2, 5, doesn't matter. And in 10 years, because I'm sure that people still watch, I don't know, Robin Williams' special. Yeah. People still watch
I just saw Richard Pryor literally like a couple of months ago.
Yeah, people are going to watch like Sean Lock's clips on YouTube forever. And if you, for some of the listeners, if you don't know maybe these people that we're talking about, definitely check out a few clips of Sean Lock. One of my favorite ever, one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life is Sean Lock's clip when he's a guest on a Big Fat Quiz of the Year, which is a yearly kind of panel quiz on Channel 4 in Britain, where they gather comics and other celebrities to answer questions about that year. And also they each year have a little kind of play by an elementary school where they show some event that happened that year, and comics are supposed to guess what it was. And Sean's reaction to those kids and to that play is just so hilarious. It's one of the funniest improvised kind of witty, just grumpy old man comments I've ever seen in my life, and it's just brilliant. So this kind of stuff, I think, and plus Carrot in a Box. Just watch Carrot in the Box. I will not say anything more than Carrot in the Box. That's a clip that I think everyone who likes comedy needs to see. Carrot in the Box. It's just comedy genius. It's just brilliant piece of TV. So, those kind of things. I follow a couple of subreddits on Reddit where people talk about comedy and panel shows and this kind of stuff. And these clips, they turn up even before Sean was gone. And now it's kind of, something that we have some kind of memory of a legend, right?
Yeah.
But even while he was alive and people were not aware that he was ill or anything, these kind of clips would come up there, I would say, once a month or something like this. Someone would share this and be like, let's all rewatch this magnificent, hilarious clip of this man just being brilliant at comedy. And this is, I think, the end
exact
goal.
Words of people who are about to hit the play button on that.
Yeah, and I think this is the end goal, for people long after you're gone, for people to come back to watch your bits, watch your sets, watch your special, watch your whatever you participated in, listen to your podcast, people. So download these episodes so you have them once we're gone in about, David, in about, what are you, 60 now? In about...
Yeah. A few years.
Yeah.
So talking about that, dead or alive, so it doesn't have to be dead or alive, on whose shoulders do you stand on the most, do you think? Which comedian would be the one that you lean on the most? On whose shoulders you stand on the most? I mean, I know there's a huge group and you'd be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but on whose shoulders do you stand on the most?
I can't say that there is some specific or particular comedian that I could say is my like influence, or that I watch this comic a lot and I, let's say, started copying or trying to mimic what they were doing or something like this, that I've learned from them or whatever. I've seen just too many comics in too many different formats, not only stand-up, but just a bunch of different stuff. And I can't really pinpoint who would be my influence, but I can say, I can answer a little bit different question. Who would I really miss? I think like if they,
go with that.
once they're gone, who I would really miss, in a sense, I would be like, oh my God, he was such a big part of my comedy journey, let's say.
Yeah.
And that would definitely be, first of all, Ricky Gervais, because his first, like his old specials were some of the first full-length specials I watched. And I remember thinking, how can a person like write jokes? How does this material appear? You know, how can you perform it so effortlessly, and how can you be so natural? And then, like, in addition to his stand-up, also his movies and TV shows and so on, that are also brilliant. And one of them, actually, Afterlife, actually talks about loss and dealing with that when a person that's important to you passes away and this kind of stuff. So that's why I think I would really be like, oh my God, we don't have this brilliant entertainer anymore among us. So him, I think Jimmy Carr as well. Again, they're both kind of very cliche comics, I think, very kind of go-to. But again, I watched Jimmy. I mean, he's basically in everything that's on British TV. So if you turn on TV, you'll see Jimmy Carr. And I do consume a lot of British TV.
So basically, you're saying that when Jimmy Carr leaves us, that basically British TV is just going to collapse.
I'm pretty sure they're going to find a new host for everything that appears on TV. But yeah, since I started with his old specials as well, and shows like Distraction or whatever it was called, there was this show, I think on Channel 4 as well, if I'm not mistaken, maybe on Dave, where he was a host. It was one of his first gigs. It was a show where contestants, just some random people who applied for the show, had to answer questions, but while being distracted by different things. For example, being electro-shocked, being like kind of on a toilet. So they had to, if they knew the answer, they had to pee to trigger the buzzer to answer the question and this kind of stuff. So they were literally on the toilet. So, you know, it was like the show where contestants were constantly distracted while answering some questions to win a car and this kind of stuff. But anyways, I've seen him in so many things, and he's been, since I started watching comedy at maybe like 15, 16, up until now, he's constantly kind of been in things. To that extent that once he stops being even the big fat quiz of the year that I mentioned that he hosts every year for the last, 15 years, once that program is over because there is no one to host it, or maybe he's replaced with someone, I would be like, oh my God, there is no more Jimmy Carr. So it's just, I wouldn't say that they influenced me and my style and my comedy personally, but they have always been, you know, like the Queen. Like, you know, like for my whole life, there's only been one Queen of England. Right? Not of England.
She's not even your queen. You're from Croatia. Why the hell do you care? You don't have the same relation to the Swedish monarchy, do you?
Yeah, but that's because, like, first of all, I'm pretty sure Swedish monarch changed like 11 times during my lifetime. And also, it's not like a thing that, you know, is in every movie, on banknotes, on whatever. You're like, there is only one, you know, queen.
Pretty sure, aren't they on the Swedish banknotes? I mean, it would make sense.
Yeah, but Swedish banknotes are not, you know, I don't use Swedish banknotes.
Do you use British pounds that much?
Not that much, but they're like, you know...
When was the last time you were in Britain? How often do you go? Every year?
Listen, that's not the point. It's like, you know, the Pope, the Queen, the President of the United States.
The Pope has his own money.
There are a few kind of, you know, personalities, characters, people.
Characters. Oh, the Pope. He's such a character. Oh, my God.
They're characters as well, because they're also playing that role to an extent. They're not real people. They are.
Hey, Pope, look, between you and me, we know this whole Jesus thing is bullshit, right? But the Bible is fake. We all know this, right?
I know you're playing a role.
I just want to say, you're just playing a role. I just want to say, loving it, though. You are nailing it. You are nailing it, dude. Keep it up. Love you.
I mean, if you're trying to say that these kind of people that I mentioned, the US president, the Queen, the Pope, that everything they say is completely raw, uncensored, unproduced, and so on, you're definitely mistaken, because it's all been through thousands of filters of PR, consultants, media, whatever. So all of them are characters, basically. We don't know what's Pope's true opinion on abortion. You know what I mean?
What is Pope's? That's his name now. What is Pope's new? Hey, Pope, Popes.
That's his title.
Popey Popes.
That's his title, the Pope.
the Pope. Yeah.
So
he's
yeah,
the Pope.
so that's what I'm saying. I mean, there are some comedy icons. There are some comedy legends that are. I mean, they're still alive, but they've been such a fundamental part of my journey through comedy that once they're gone, I'll definitely feel that difference. Yeah. So
because Elizabeth has cracked some zingers. God, we're gonna miss her when she goes.
That's not her. Ricky and Jimmy and so on. Her, like I just gave an example that in other spheres of my life, David Beckham, Cristiano Ronaldo, Eminem, they're like living legends who've made a huge mark in what they do. And once they're gone, I'll be like, oh my God, there is no more Eminem in our world. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
Like so that's what I'm saying. So okay, in comedy, who is that for you? Maybe they're gone, maybe they're still around.
One of them is actually close. I think he's still with us, but close to going because of health issues, unfortunately. Billy Connolly. Billy Connolly was a big one, like the whole family watching him. Or Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks, when he goes, that's going to be my second Robin Williams for sure. That is going to hit me hard. Even now, like when I see him, like I saw him in Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee with Jerry Seinfeld goes to see Rob Reiner, I think it is, and then him and Mel actually have dinner with each other every night. Like they are still old buddies. They live down the street from each other. They visit. They eat dinner together, watch TV and stuff. They're like the old couple, odd couple. You just think they were doing the old man bit back in like the 60s or whatever, and they're still best mates. Anyway, so. And when I saw him there, he looks so old and he's so frail. And he's such an old man. Like he's sitting there and he's like, what? Like, what's going on here? Like, what are you two yabbering about? And I just was watching kind of going, hold on, Mel. Just hold on, buddy. Just, you can't leave
Please
us.
stay.
I'm not ready, dude. So Mel Brooks would be one. Billy Connolly would be, another one. And then I guess people sort of like Eddie Izzard. I guess, like, I really admire, like, the stuff that he's done there, Eddie Izzard, because of that surrealist sort of, I don't know, I think he's one of those also avant-garde ones. Like, he created his own little mold there of his own unique style of talking about history, but in a very light-hearted way, but it's serious topics like genocide, murders, and inquisitions, and, turning it all about cake. So, yeah, I would say those guys.
All right. So I think with this, I think we can wrap up this episode. The final thing I want to say is that it's obviously huge loss and sad news every time a comedian dies. But just the fact that even we are talking about them and so on, I still think that that's an amazing thing that they've accomplished. That they've made two guys, one Australian, one Croatian, in the center of Moscow, made a podcast about them. I think if once I'm gone, if there would be two comedians from...
Don't worry, you will be one day.
No, I know I'll be gone. The only question is, will anyone notice? That's the real question. So if once I'm gone, there are two comedians in Thailand, one from Iceland and one from Zimbabwe, talking about me, I'll consider myself successful comedian. And to the rest of you, thank you so much for listening. I've been Igor Monday.
And I've been David Munoz.
And leave your comments and requests for our new topics on our social media.
We've actually got it! Woohoo!
Yeah, we got Facebook, Instagram.
And Twitter.
So you can leave comments or requests for new topics there. And if you would like to support us and help us in developing this, investing a bit more in our equipment, in our promotion and so on, you can also donate to our Patreon. Everything is linked on all of our media where we post the episodes. Thank you once more, and we will hear you again on the Comedy Kiosk. Goodbye.
Ciao.